Thank you very much, Ricardo. I'm assuming that Brad has connected, but I'd like to introduce Brad Bender of Google, who will be spending the next hour or so with. Hopefully, I can do as good a job as Michael has done with the, um, the person before him. Um, Brad is the VP of product, Google News. So he oversees the global product design and strategy for Google News. This includes news on search, discover, and the Google Assistant, the Google News app, subscribe with Google, as well as tools for journalists. Um, Brad has been with Google, wow, for quite some time, 11 years, I believe. He was previously the VP product for display and video ads. So if anybody has any questions on that later, they can also ask that question. And before that, he worked with DoubleClick. Now, Google Latin America has been a good supporter of IAPA for some years. We have enjoyed the kind sponsorship for many of our programs and events here at IAPA, and have also benefited from Google's kind acceptance to be on our panels, and that is representatives like yourself, Brad. As you know, however, what Google does is of great interest to IAPA's members, as its activities overlap with ours in terms of content and the advertising spend, the latter of which has suffered immensely during this pandemic. Today, we are keen to hear from Google and you, Brad, on what you're currently doing in media, what plans exist for the future, and how Google plans to work with our members for mutual achievement of our objectives. So without much further ado, I would like to allow Brad to give his presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Ricardo and Christopher, for that introduction. And hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be able to participate in this event with all of you virtually. It's an honor for me to speak here at the Inter-American Press Association's 76th General Assembly today. I want to start by just thanking SIP for your tireless work to promote freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and journalism over the Americas for so long. This is a mission of the highest importance, especially during these challenging times, as you were just mentioning. And it's one that Google is deeply committed to as well. Thank you once again for all the work that you do. As mentioned, my name is Brad Bender. I've worked with digital media and publishers over the last 20 years. Here at Google, after 12 years on the ad side of the business, I joined the news team as Vice President of Product, which, as mentioned, I lead news on all surfaces where it can show. So that includes search, discover, the Google News app, audio, as well as solutions for news publishers, including Subscribe with Google, our Journalist Studio, and a new product that I'll talk about later called News Showcase. I've had the chance to visit many of your countries over the years, from Mexico to Costa Rica, Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina. And while it's great to connect with all of you virtually now, I hope at some point after COVID passes, we can find the opportunity to connect in person. When I joined the news team about a year ago, I was really excited about the opportunity to bring my ads and news experiences together. Getting to continue working closely with news publishers around the world like you, as well as working to ensure people have access to quality journalism. And if this year is any indication, news is more important than ever. COVID has shown us, the way that we understand the world in our communities and the way that we, as citizens, stay informed needs to be better and more accessible than it's ever been, especially at a local level, which is something we've been leaning into. As the challenges we face across the world grow more complex, I believe, as many of you do, that a vibrant news industry is essential to our readers, to an informed citizenry, and to strengthening democracy. And as some of the top America's publishers, editors, and journalists, you have a critical role to play. This work also matters deeply to Google. Our mission is to organize the world's information and make it accessible and useful to everyone. At Google, the user is at the heart of this mission. We build and iterate on products to meet our users' needs in all the moments that matter. For me, I'm reminded of the moments in my life where it was clear how critical news was. Whether it was living in New York City during 9/11, or trying to navigate a blackout shortly after my twin daughters were born when the power didn't come on for a week. All the way through to when my wife and I were visiting Ushuaia at the southern tip of Argentina, getting the important local news from El Diario del Fin del Mundo. That might be one of the few newspapers anywhere where people feel okay that the front page says that you're reading about the end of the world. Access to quality journalism at the best of times is important to democratic societies. And in those real moments of need, news becomes personal and indeed vital in helping people stay up to date with fast-moving stories in order to make informed decisions that could affect their health and well-being. That's a big part of what motivates me. But as Christopher was just mentioning, that's become more challenging over the years. And as you've all experienced, the news industry itself has faced financial challenges for decades, first from radio and then television, and most recently, the internet. The internet's dramatically transformed the media environment and changed where each of us goes for timely information. The number of channels that advertisers can spend their dollars, pesos, or reals in has proliferated. Advertisers target their spending against content categories that are contextually relevant for them, as well as where people are spending their time. And all of these challenges have only been compounded by the pandemic. As the world becomes more digital, these dynamics are putting increasing pressure on publishers like you, who are in various states of transitioning to digital. Now, we can't turn the clock back to a time before the internet existed. Instead, we need to look forward toward a more sustainable news industry. And to do that requires the participation of many. That involves companies like Google, alongside governments, policymakers, other companies, associations, and of course, publishers themselves. We want to be involved in that conversation and support a process that leads to rules of the road that are fair to all. We see collaboration as really being key in helping the industry in this transition to digital. And we want to play our part in helping publishers like yourselves build a sustainable and diverse business. For nearly 20 years, Google's worked collaboratively with news publishers to provide extensive support toward the future of news. We do this through programs, products, and partnerships. The funding and training we deliver through the Google News Initiative program, through our products, including our advertising and subscription tools that help publishers like yourselves drive more revenue, and finally, our partnerships, including a new $1 billion backed effort for a new news experience called Google News Showcase, and I'll share more on that shortly. On the first point, we fund many programs through the Google News Initiative, or G&I for short, and I'll just highlight a few. We invest in training and programs that help all news publishers, but especially small and local news publishers. Examples of our G&I programs are the Digital Growth Program. It's a free business transformation program meant to help small and medium-sized news organizations build and grow their businesses online. We launched 3 weeks ago, and we've already had over 1,100 news organizations across Latin America attend our reader revenue workshops. Our News Lab training in the region has trained over 30,000 journalists in Google's tools for storytelling and reporting. And the Google Innovation Challenge has funded 30 media organizations from Periodistas de a Pie, who built a member solution for local newspapers, minimizing costs in Mexico, to La Voz de Cordoba in Argentina, which built a propensity to pay platform to increase and accelerate the conversion rate of their subscriptions. Next, we've all seen how mis and disinformation is damaging to societies, especially in the midst of a global pandemic, where factual information is critical to saving lives. That's why we partnered with Checado to launch LATAM Coronavirus. It's an open database of nearly 3,000 claims related to COVID-19 made by fact-checking organizations in LATAM. Our media literacy programs, Educamedia and Digimente, have helped consumers be better equipped to tackle misinformation as well. COVID's also strained the finances of many news organizations, especially that of local media. And that's why in response, the GNI created the Journalism Emergency Relief Fund. There we funded over 1,000 small and medium-sized businesses across the region. That includes Diario de Cuyo from Argentina, Plural from Brazil, Mi Oriente from Colombia, and Portico Querétaro from Mexico. This money's been used in diverse and creative ways, from ensuring basic reporting needs, giving emergency stipends to enable reporters to cover the crisis, all the way to driving audience engagement and generating subscriptions in businesses where it's been needed most. So that's just a small set of examples of the types of ways we've been looking to help create a more sustainable news ecosystem through our Google News Initiatives programs. Next, on the product side, we're building products to help provide value to publishers, whether it's through better monetization or helping journalists do their work more efficiently and creatively. One of the biggest ways we contribute to the industry is through the traffic we drive to news sites every day. You can think of Google like the digital version of a physical newsstand or a news agent, but the difference is, historically, publishers would have had to have paid to have their content displayed in a newsstand. Today in LATAM, we send people to news sites 2.8 billion times every month for free. That adds up to 34 billion visits a year, starting from our surfaces. This traffic drives value for publishers because it represents an opportunity for publishers to show readers an ad or an offer to donate or subscribe. A study we did with large publishers actually put the value of that visit at between 4.5 and 7 cents. But whatever number you choose, it's clear that this traffic drives a monetary benefit to publishers. Our ad products also continue helping publishers making money online. And for reader revenue, we built a subscription product for the news industry, which is called Subscribe with Google, which makes it easier for people to subscribe to their favorite news publications. This technology now has over 100 partners. That includes 20 publishers from LATAM who have been seeing great results. As an example, Grupo Reforma has seen a 43% increase in conversions, with 13% more page views from Subscribe with Google versus direct digital subscribers. Overall, 37% of all of their subscriptions now occur through Subscribe with Google. And to round out the product side, to reduce newsroom costs, we recently launched Journalist Studio, which is a new suite of products that harness the power of Google to help reporters focus on what they do best, which is reporting. One of these new tools is called Pinpoint, which we built with investigative journalists in mind. We know that quality journalism often comes from long-term investigative projects. It requires time-consuming work to sift, through the massive collections of documents, images, and audio. And what Pinpoint can do is rapidly go through hundreds of thousands of documents by automatically identifying and organizing the most frequently mentioned people, organizations, and locations. And all of this is aimed at helping journalists save time and effort, which of course can help reduce newsroom costs. Finally, I know there's been a lot of discussion here, as well as in other parts of the world, about paying for content. We've always said that where there's a product need, we're willing to pay to license content. And in the last few weeks, we took that commitment to the future of news to a new level with an initial $1 billion investment in the first 3 years to pay for content for a new online service called Google News Showcase. These partnerships pay publishers for high quality content that will create an enhanced storytelling experience for users. The goal is to create something that gives readers more context and journalistic perspective on stories, as well as helping publishers' distinct editorial voices shine through. It also gives publishers the opportunity to build deeper relationships with users of Google products. An important feature of Google News Showcase is that after a user clicks on one of these story panels, the full article opens on the publisher's website. So the publisher gets all the value of a user visiting their web property, including the opportunity to show them ads or potentially to convert them to become a subscriber. As we announced a couple of weeks ago, readers in Brazil and Germany are already able to access News Showcase via the Google News app. And we've already signed up around 200 publications, including national titles like Folha de Sao Paulo, Estadão, UOL, Veja, and Infobay, alongside regionally and locally important mastheads such as Litoral Argentina, La Cacheta, and Zero Hora. I'm truly delighted at how the program's taking off. And News Showcase has been a very different approach for Google from a product standpoint, actually. It's a new way to help our users connect to stories that matter, but it's also a significant step forward in how we worked with partners like you to develop it. It was very much a collaboration. We had an early access program where we worked closely with many publishers, including many in LATAM, to get feedback and insights that help shape the product experience. And of course, it's a new way for Google to support the future of quality journalism with our biggest investment ever. This deep collaboration has been amazing for us. It's something we're serious about. So definitely keep an eye on this product as we continue conversations with even more publishers and expand the program beyond these 3 years, building on the work we've done with the news industry over the last 20 years. Now, something I've noticed working closely with publishers on this new product, and from the many conversations I've had with journalists and publishers over the past many years, is that whether newsrooms realize it or not, you're all product people. And what I mean by that is that the success of your business rests on how good the experience and the product is for your users. And the people that have recognized this have been leaning into the new habits they're seeing from users. Over my short time on the news team, it's been really heartening to see many of these product-centric discussions in news circles. And being a product person, I thought it could be helpful to share some of my own experiences building products for users, whether that's been in ads or news. At Google, there are 3 key things we keep top of mind: product market fit, product value, and product innovation. Now, product market fit is the basis of any successful product strategy, whether that's in news or elsewhere. And this goes beyond servicing your users. It's really about listening, learning, and gathering continuous feedback from them. At Google, people may not realize just how much research we're always actively conducting and how much testing and iterating we do to make sure we deeply understand our users and how their behaviors are evolving. From an understanding of product market fit, then you're able to think about product value. In today's competitive information economy and the changing dynamics of advertising, you have to earn your users' attention and loyalty, and even better, their financial support. This requires having a unique value proposition that really understands your end users, helping you stand out from the crowd. And finally, when I talk about product innovation, I mean, how do we create the products for the next 3 to 5 years, rather than improve the ones that we've had in the previous decade? For us, this means constant experimentation, iteration, and testing. We test everything and experiment with even the smallest things, such as simple UI changes. An example of how all of this comes together is the recent innovation in audio news and visual story experiences. These innovations were driven by an understanding of how news consumption among a segment of users, Gen Z, is changing. There are now more than 2.5 billion Gen Zers globally. They've overtaken millennials, and research shows that the way they consume news is different than the general population. Since birth, they've been inundated with news and new ways to access it as well. They view Instagram as being as important as CNN in where they access their news, and they value articles, video, photos, and audio equally. So therefore, to stand out in the market, we've seen many publishers experimenting and leaning into things like podcasts as well as visual formats. For example, 73% of digital native news outlets release podcasts. So with this understanding in mind, we launched our audio news product called Your News Update last year. And there we pay news publishers to provide content for this new space in the market. And this year we launched Your News Update in the Google Podcast app, helping publishers build audiences and deepen user engagement and loyalty. On the visual side, a couple of weeks ago, we launched Web Stories in Discover in 3 countries, US, India, and Brazil. And it's been great to see this innovation come from Brazil, where we're working with creators and publishers to bring the best visual content from around the web for a more immersive experience. It's this willingness to try that helps us innovate, and it can help you explore areas like new reader revenue models, new forms of content consumption, or something else entirely. As product companies, this iterative process of learning, experimenting, and building helps to find product market fit, product value, and product innovation. At the end of the day, for a sustainable business, you have to connect with your users, wherever and whoever they might be, and show them the unique value you could provide them. This can help you build your brand and stand out from the crowd, earning loyal readership over time. That's the way we orient ourselves as a product-centric company, and it's been great to see many of you embarking on a similar journey. It's clear just how crucial news is to society. And I want to give a huge thanks to all of you and your teams for the critical work you do to deliver journalism to people when it's been needed most. Today is one of those times. As I said in the beginning, we want to play our part in building a sustainable and diverse ecosystem. For us, the value of news isn't about economics. It's about its role in building a more informed world, educating and informing people, as well as strengthening democracy. We care deeply about the future of news, and we'll continue to look for new ways to support journalism. So to close, I want to invite all of you, please, to follow up with me. One of the most valuable things I take away from events like these is, the one-off informal conversations with everyone. And while the virtual environments made that tough, I do want to keep that opportunity open. These shared values, open conversations, continued partnership is how we all can help move the industry toward a better future. And I'm looking forward to supporting and continuing to work with all of you to do that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Brad. That was very good, very comprehensive. I think your suggestion having people get in touch with you is a good one. I was going to suggest that, you know, we have nearly 80 participants at this point in time. So perhaps if you could share your contacts in the chat, many of those who probably didn't know about all of these initiatives will be able to contact you to avail themselves of those opportunities. So we've heard about, you know, what it is that Google is doing for the industry, but I liked that you moved away from that and spoke to your product. So Google offers a product and 3 areas of focus which you recommend that all of us as creators of products focus on, which is the market fit, the value proposition, and the innovation. Those are all very good pointers to have. But I think, you know, where we want to focus as a group, and I mean, and having you there to answer these, you know, questions is, you know, the independence of the media institutions is very important for this fight in democracy. And the truth is that our financial models have been eroded rather significantly by Google's success. And so the question really is, I mean, how are we getting as much out of this two-way relationship as we should be? And I'm sure there are many questions that that are in the chat, or that you know, persons would like to pose. But I guess there is this feeling that, you know, with all of what you said you've put forward and the value of that, is it really enough? We are grappling, and I think Martin Echeverries is on the line. We are grappling with, you know, intellectual property and the use thereof without the compensation. I mean, at the heart of our financial viability is our intellectual property rights of news. Martin, you can probably more eloquently ask a question on that area than I can. Are you there?
Yes, Christopher, thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks, Brad, for your inspiring presentation and for all the efforts Google is doing for the news industry. As you may know, we have a discussion panel 2 days ago about the issue of copyright laws all around the world, and maybe competition issues in several countries. One of the questions related of your with your announce of the launch of Google News Showcase. How is working? How is advancing this product in those countries where there have been appeared laws or regulations related of the value of content or the copyright issues, like France and Australia? Is the product being advancing in these countries in the last weeks? And the second question, well, as maybe Christopher said in his previous intervention, one of the main issues of the media industry and related with platforms is, you know, the part of the advertising model that has gone to the platforms. And one of the other problems is that the very low price of advertising in the digital world has not relationship with the quality of the products that they are offered. Do you consider this is possible to have some different pricing of the advertising in terms of the quality of content?
Great, thank you so much, Martin, for the questions. They're really good questions, and I think let me start with your first question, and then I may ask you to repeat the second question. Make sure I don't forget it. So our intention with News Showcase is for it to be a global program. To date, we actually have around 200 publications signed up across Germany, Brazil, Australia, Argentina, and Canada. And that roster will just continue to grow, as we continue conversations in a range of other countries, including Belgium, the Netherlands, India, the UK, and more. And it's just a matter of, how quickly we can get to kind of a critical mass in any given country to be able to launch there. We're really excited to launch, in both, Germany and Brazil, alongside the great talent that exists in those markets. It really was the case that we had the critical mass of content that would enable us to have these story panels that could show in our Google News app that then users could react to. And we're really excited to actually learn, right? We're excited to learn to see how users are interacting with it, how publishers are using our tools. We actually created a whole new set of tools inside a publisher center where publishers can create these panels. We've also made it so that they could do that in more of an automated way, connect it with their content systems, if that's how they want to scale it. So, I think we're all very interested to see, how people are interacting. And like I said, I think it's a little bit different than maybe some other programs that exist in the market. I think, Google is very aligned actually with the success of the open web and the open ecosystem. If you think about like Google itself, people search, they click, and then they go, and there needs to be an open web of information for people to search. And so we have a very kind of common cause with web publishers, and that's been a lot of why I think we've been on this journey in a collaborative way. We feel over the last 20 years to try and help support the growth and sustainability of this sector. So we're excited to see, because Showcase is a very similar idea. I mean, it's a bit of an expansion beyond what someone might see like a headline. Of course, up to the publisher what they want to share, but they could share just a bit more detail. But it's like bullet points, or maybe it's a little bit of a timeline. But still, if a user wants to read that full content, they would click from that story panel. They're not kept, on Google properties. They click out, they go to the publisher's property, and of course there a publisher can show them ads, help show them another article, convince them to become a subscriber. So we're really excited about the program and scaling it beyond the current countries we're in. I think your second question was about sustainability and just what's happened with advertising too. And, and as somebody, who spent a lot of time on the advertising side of our business, I've spent time with folks in Latin America, but also around the world, seeing how this dynamic has unfolded. And I think the important thing there is to recognize, this has actually been, I think, happening over a long period of time, and it even predates the internet, right? It was, print was the kind of internet of its day. If you think about it, turn of the century, that would have been the place where you got all the information about what's happening in your community, but also where you would buy and sell goods. Right, where you might, see advertisements for a local business. It was all in, just in that newspaper. And then of course, radio came along, television, cable, and just the audiences started to shift, right? There were just more places where people could, consume their news. And I think what happened with the internet, and this predates Google, is just there are many sites on the internet, right? There are specialty sites. There are classified sites, whereas the newspaper might have been the place where all the classifieds happened before. Now you have, Craigslist, and you have eBay. You have places where people are kind of selling things, but also there are specialty content sites, right? There are specialty sites that cover sports, or there are specialty sites that cover entertainment. And so whereas it used to be kind of, I think a newspaper, again, at the turn of the century was really like the entirety of this space. Now, really, people are kind of choosing to go to many different parts. And I think the way that that's played out is, many news creators found that the people, online were coming more and more for the unique value proposition that they created on that front, which is, of course, the hard news. Now, the challenge with hard news that I think we all experience is at times hard news isn't really great for advertisers. And we've seen that with COVID, right? Many advertisers are putting on negative keywords. So even though like the number of articles that have been written about COVID, I'm sure all of your page views have increased, right? As people are trying to learn what's going on, and most importantly, what's going on in the local community. But not all advertisers want to run in that content, and I think that's kind of been the dynamic that is why we decided to create the Journalism Emergency Relief Fund, because we saw that was especially hard hitting with local and smaller newsrooms where advertisers were pulling back. In addition to just like the challenges I think that COVID faced us all kind of personally. So I think the important thing is to really, when I think about like sustainability and I think about the longer term approach, it really is, thinking about the pillars of the stool of monetization. And, I think whereas maybe digitally it used to be able to be majority advertising, I think we just need to start to think about where else funding can come from. And that could be reader revenue. We've seen a lot of great success with reader revenue. That could take a lot of different forms, right? That could be obviously subscriptions, but not everyone wants to engage in subscriptions, but we're seeing more movement towards subscriptions. But it could be donations. It could be micropayments like day passes. We've seen people experimenting with that. So it's really like if you are creating valuable content that your readership wants, and you've created that loyalty, that could be a good way. And then I think another pillar is really in this area of innovation. And I mentioned when I was speaking, I think podcasts opens up consumption to a whole new generation. And what I've seen in podcasting is a lot of like sponsorship style engagement where, this podcast is sponsored by, and they pick that up and just, it gives you a whole new distribution channel above and beyond, what you're doing with maybe text and image today. But of course, then there are other things, we see, things like Google News Showcase as potentially another avenue for monetization. There'll be other programs like this, that can help like provide additional support. So I think that's on the like revenue side. And then of course, to run a good business, you also have to think about the cost side. And I think one of the things I think, especially the folks that, came from print is, we're all lugging around this cost basis of like these printing presses, right? That just may not be getting the same return. And so I think there's this digital divide that we all have to, work together to cross, which is like, what is the right cost structure for the business? How can we make that more efficient? And that's where like we've been leaning into the Journalist Studio. I mentioned Pinpoint, which I'm really excited about. There have been some great case studies about investigative teams using Pinpoint, but that's an example of where we could bring cost savings, into the business as well, rather than reporters having to review, thousands of pages of documents and try to manually sift through them. My wife is a journalist, so I get to see how this sometimes plays through at home, and being able to have like technology you could bring to bear on that, is pretty exciting. I'd urge you all, if you haven't checked out Pinpoint, to take a look. at the technology that we've brought to bear there. But those are some of the ideas. And then I think the last thing I would leave you with, Martin, is just that idea of product market fit and product value and innovation. We are seeing a number of players really think about it this way. And I think those are the players that are doing very well right now. The folks that have listened to their readers and realizing that like the next generation of readers wants things like audio, right? It's being willing to kind of invest in the future of consumption. So we're not just kind of anchored on, how the business used to look 20 years ago or 10 years ago, right? It can't be about looking back. It has to be about looking forward. And we're happy to kind of collaborate and partner on that moving forward. Thanks for the question. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Martin. What I found interesting in this entire conversation was not one mention of the term artificial intelligence. Was that deliberate, or is it because it's something that you have employed for so many years?
Yeah, look, I think it is one of the things that just at Google, right, is a big area of investment for us. And we do have research teams that are investing very heavily in basically machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I think, but at the end of it, really, I think the outputs of that have to be in kind of the products and the value that people get. But certainly, like when I talk about Pinpoint and our ability to kind of sift through, thousands of pages of documents, be able to do like entity extraction, be able to take audio files. I think one of the coolest things about Pinpoint, actually, a lot of reporters will record an interview, and we have a tool called Recorder where you could do that. And of course, you can attach that to Pinpoint, and we will do, text. We'll do speech to text, basically translation. And of course, we can only do that because of things like artificial intelligence. And then once you have that in more of a text form, of course, then you could start to do things like entity extraction, find out where there are pairings through all that data. So it certainly is a place that we're investing, and it permeates our product thinking. But I think you're right, Christopher, is that like it's kind of ingrained into the way we think about things at Google. But look, at the heart of it, I still think goes back to like product market fit and product value and product innovation. Like if you're not starting out just with that like inclination to really be actively listening to users, and not just what they're telling you, but what they're doing through their actions, right? It's like that old adage about, if you had asked people a couple hundred years ago, like, what do they want? They want a faster horse. Of course, we would have never had the innovation of the car. It's that same idea. Like, I think we have to be thinking like a little bit outside the box and taking all the information we're getting, not just like what people are explicitly telling us, but also what they're showing us in their actions. I think that's where like you can track, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or, Twitter, the consumption patterns are evolving as we speak. And, and I think just kind of staying attuned to that is really important, if we want to be relevant for, not just ourselves, because we're not the user, right? The user is probably somebody who's like just graduated from college, who's going to be possibly like the news consumer for the next 20 to 40 years. How do you become relevant for them?
Thank you very much for that response. I have two more questions. I don't know if there are any questions online. Ricardo, I'm gonna ask that you assist me with that. But we just heard from Faris Akkad of Facebook about Facebook's response to the proposed regulations in Australia. Can you tell us a little bit about Google's experience with that and what Google's position is?
Yeah, so just to be clear, for those who don't know what's happened in Australia, the Australian Competition Authority, it's called the ACCC, they've just put forward what they're calling a mandatory code of conduct for news industry. It's an interesting code in that it's supposed to be an industry-wide code, but actually it focuses on solely Google and Facebook. Just to be clear, we don't oppose a code that governs the relationship between news businesses and digital platforms, but right now the way the law is drafted, isn't fair, frankly, isn't workable. There's a clause in there that's called baseball arbitration. I don't know if you've already kind of chatted about what baseball arbitration is, but it is it's basically an unfair structure of arbitration at the end of the day. And the way that the rules have been slanted are quite unfair. So the model being proposed from our standpoint isn't workable for Google. That said, we're committed to finding viable solutions. We've been engaged with the ACCC and the government, to work through that and to ensure the final version of the code is fair and workable for everyone.
So that answer was pretty consistent. So the final answer that I have, and I'm by no means a journalist, I'm a mechanical engineer with a finance degree, but I think I'm going to do everybody proud and ask the question, is Google really too big? What about this antitrust case that has been filed against Google? How do you feel about that?
Look, this is pending litigation, so unfortunately, I can't go into detail. I would point you to.
But is it too big?
The blog post. Well, so one thing I want everyone on the call to know, there is a blog post that was published earlier this week. It was written by our Senior Vice President of Global Affairs, Kent Walker. I do urge you all to read that because I think he really laid out kind of our take, and I'm not in a position to kind of comment further. I think the one thing I can say, Christopher, look, our free products and ongoing innovation benefit American consumers, benefit the U.S. economy, as well as the many small businesses who've, frankly seen more choice, lower prices as a result of the work. And in the meanwhile, we remain absolutely focused, on delivering, the free services that help Americans every day, because, that's what matters most.
Okay, that's where my journalistic prowess stops. So if there's any other journalist in the audience who would like to continue with my question, follow on, or ask another question, because Brad has most graciously, as Google has always done, taken the time to sit with us and to field the questions, some of them more difficult than others, but the floor is really open to ask what necessary questions you have. Do we see anybody? It's kind of difficult for me to see if anybody has their hand up. So yes, who is that? Yari?
Yari de Costa Rica.
Yari, go ahead.
Señor Brad, muchas gracias. Una exposición muy bonita, muy amplia y concisa, muy objetiva. Me gusta el apoyo que también tiene usted, ve a los medios como un aliado, no como enemigo. Y en muchas ocasiones nos fortalecen también con famosos anuncios de Google dentro de nuestras páginas, que ha sido muy difícil venderlas para los medios tradicionales que hemos incursionado en estas tecnologías, ¿verdad? Como Google, Facebook, todas estas redes sociales. Ustedes han venido a ser un partner de nosotros debido a que nuestros negocios de cada país, las personas no confían mucho todavía en los anuncios en redes y quieren esos anuncios en redes con un precio muy bajo, a costas de un sacrificio muy grande que tenemos los medios de comunicación oficiales o tradicionales, como ustedes nos dicen, ya que generamos mucho empleo con los periodistas, fotógrafos y choferes para ir a cubrir todas estas noticias con que llenamos todas las redes sociales. los comerciantes no creen en nosotros en redes y quieren el anuncio muy barato, ¿verdad? Y creo que el medio tradicional es el que nos sigue dando de comer a toda una planilla grande que tenemos detrás. Quería preguntarle si ustedes, como la compañía Google, están ayudando económicamente a algunos medios a través de créditos, pero no devueltos. Esa es mi pregunta. Gracias. Porque ha habido mucha estafa ahora en esto del COVID, ¿verdad? Entonces están llevando muchos correos de que Google estaba ayudando. Quería sacar esa inquietud para toda Latinoamérica.
So Yari, thank you. Muchas gracias for your question. And I must admit, I have studied Spanish, and I am not sure I fully got your question though.
I was wondering.
Yeah. So
there is a translate button. Look at the globe on the
good. I will.
Yes,
I will.
and select English.
I did not know.
Yeah, but essentially it was a message of thanks, and that you appear to be more of a friend than an enemy. The challenge that a lot of media houses are going through is that it's the traditional part of their businesses that are still putting food on the table. And then, you know, the question at the end, and Yari, you can come back in anytime you feel I haven't done you justice, but the question at the end was, you know, can you tell us a little bit more about the grants that and the loans that Google would give to what she terms as the struggling media in Latin America?
Absolutely. And Yari, did that capture your question? I apologize. I just didn't get all the subtlety of that. So, and thank you, Christopher, for
you did a lot better than I would. Can you imagine? You've only faced that for an hour. I faced that for 10 years. Go ahead.
No, you did. You helped me out there. I appreciate that. So, yeah, Yari, there are a number of ways in which we're looking to, you know, support the community, and it has been a great collaboration. I really appreciate you saying that. It's so important for us. You know, I think you heard from me, like, I just think like the work that you all do is so important to people and society. And, you know, and I think it has been a challenge. And it's something I think we all have to come together to try and solve. The Google News Initiative has a number of, you know, these types of, you know, support, and, you know, whether it's the Digital Growth Program, it's the Google Innovation Challenge, you know, that the News Lab training that I mentioned, that Journalism Emergency Relief Fund, you know, a number of those are geared, you know, towards kind of the smaller local businesses. And so that would be my kind of starting point, you know, for smaller businesses. Certainly the Google News Showcase, you know, we're going to have a range of publishers that participate there. That includes the traditional newspapers, but also, you know, really relevant local and regional papers as well. So it could be that a, you know, partnership there makes sense as well. But happy to kind of engage with you to figure out like which of the many ways that we're trying to engage with the community, you know, makes the most sense for your situation, or whoever you're referring to. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, Brad.
Perfecto, muchas gracias. Y tal vez don Ricardo nos puede ayudar ahí a un contacto directo con el señor Brandt. Gracias, muchas gracias.
Con mucho gusto.
Right, Brad did promise to put his contacts right in the chat.
Yes,
no?
I think I'm going to. I'll make sure I do that. I haven't been wrestling with the chat because I've been trying to stay focused on all of you, but I'll do that after I wrap for sure.
Either way, go ahead.
No, I was just about to say, Christopher, I don't know if anyone else has any questions. I just thank you all so much again for what you do, for the collaboration, you know, we've had over the years. You know, I think we're all living through this. You know, the business model for newspapers has been evolving for more than a century. You know, audiences have turned kind of to other sources You know, and the internet's been the latest shift. It certainly won't be the last. But you know, alongside other companies, you know, government, civic associations, we absolutely want to play our part in helping journalism in the 21st century, you know, not just survive, but thrive. You know, and I'm sure we can continue to do great things together in LATAM, you know, a region that's just full of talent, potential for digital evolution. So I just want to speak on behalf of all Googlers, just thank you so much for the time. Thanks for everything you do. And thanks again for the partnership.
Thank you very much, Brad, on behalf of all the attendees. And you've actually, at this hour of the day, which is a slow hour, you've increased the number of persons in the chat. So congrats. Testimony to the quality of the presentation.
Mr. President, is there time for one more question?
Only if my boss allows it, because he always says that I'm terrible with time. Oh, okay. Go ahead then.
Brett, thank you very much for your collaboration, for your work with us. And I would like to ask you, you know, the biggest difficulty, I think, in all of this is that the need for good and accurate content is necessary and as big now as it ever was, perhaps in all of history. And in some aspects, there's some efficiencies that have made it easier and more cost-effective to get and generate some of that content, but it continues to be a very, very expensive proposition. And certainly Google has helped in the distribution, but in the actual part of helping in the compensatory aspect, in the money aspect, is I think the big elephant in the room always when we have these types of discussions. And I don't see a need to make it look like an adversarial relationship artificially, but certainly that dynamic is there, and it makes it much harder for the people who produce content. And there is a question in there somewhere, I'm not sure exactly how to phrase it, but if you could comment just on what I said, perhaps you could shed some light. And also, how do you see your journalistic initiatives 5 or 10 years down the road? What would that look like?
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Alejandro. So the first one, couldn't agree more on the importance of debating misinformation. You know, it's something, you know, we work hard at every day, frankly, together with society. It's been, you know, I talked about Chicando and the work we've done in, you know, LATAM, you know, related to coronavirus. You know, we'll continue to kind of support that. We made some investments actually into fact-checking societies as well. So we're thinking through how do we, you know, how do we create kind of a flywheel where this is, you know, happening, you know, more broadly. Frankly, I think part of the challenge with misinformation, I think if someone, put it this way, if somebody's come to Google and typed something in that they want to check, that's probably one of the best scenarios we could hope for, because a lot of people are seeing, you know, fake information or false information somewhere else, right? They're seeing it in their messaging app, or they're seeing it in a social situation, and they're just forwarding it on. And I think that's part of the problem. So I think we all have to think about how can we work together to, you know, make this more of an ecosystem style solution. And we're committed to investing resources and, you know, taking actions. And we're constantly looking to do more, as well as refining what we already do. You know, I think in general, like the search results, you know, page, I mean, that's something, you know, we spent a lot of time on, you know, just from an authoritativeness and a quality standpoint. You know, that's part of what goes into the ranking of that page. So I think in general, like search itself does fairly well there. But I think what you're talking about is kind of the broader piece. And you know, I agree, it's an area I think we all need to do more in. I think, you know, I mentioned also the media literacy stuff that we're doing, the Educa Media, Didemente, you know, some of the efforts that we've done also historically supporting original journalism. And obviously even Google News Showcase that I talked about today helps showcase, right, kind of journalistic content and highlights like kind of that deeper journalism that you were talking about. So your second question was about like, what do we see in the next decade? I think was your question.
4 or 5 years.
Yeah, sorry.
He said 5 years, but I think a decade is a good challenge to you. I mean, you've already told us in your areas of focus what's 3 years down. So +2 should be easy. So give us 10.
Yeah, I think the most interesting and exciting things that are happening are, you know, things that we couldn't have necessarily imagined, right, 5-10 years ago. If you think about how you consumed information even a decade ago, I think you'd recognize that it has been transformed since then. I do think, you know, some of these trends that we're seeing, ambient computing, I think is a really interesting one. You know, that's like the smart home and the fact that like you can start to ask questions. I already do this, right? I ask questions in my Google Home. I actually turn it off because if I say the keyword, it'll go off and it'll try and answer a question on my behalf. But you can imagine more of your home being kind of wired that way. And, you know, just having kind of an ongoing conversation where you want information and it kind of surfaces in audio, as an example. We're already seeing the start of that now, but that I think could, you know, could accelerate pretty significantly. I think there will continue to be evolution in the content consumption path. You know, what we're seeing, I think the tip of the iceberg right now with like, you know, TikTok and Instagram, these like web stories type idea, you know, snippets of video content. But then I think at the end of all of this, right, it could feel like a barrage if people aren't thinking about like, how do we tell the broader story? How do we help people like step away from the deluge of information to make sense of what's going on, right? So I think that lifting up and that kind of understanding, you know, the layer on top, which I think is what you all collectively spend a lot of time on. I think that's going to continue to be important, really important. Helping people contextualize what's the news of the day is, why it's relevant for them, and what might be coming next, right? I think that whole layer is going to just become even more important as just the forms of consumption evolve over time. All right. Well, thank you so much for the question, Alejandro. That was great. Really appreciate it. And once again, just thank you also for giving me a little bit of extra time. It's great to see you all, and you know, appreciate the time and the work. Thank you.